I like that you've stuck to your guns on a lot of things over the years, and I think it's great. And you've always just said better is better, and I think that's just so simple. Like, okay, you got the option between the Coke and the orange juice. It's like, well, better is better. Like, yes, you can have the Coke. It's fine. You can drink it. I'm not saying you can't do it, but better is better, and try to make the best possible choice that you can make repeatedly. Do you think that fructose, is there any reason to be concerned over fructose with fatty liver disease, or is this back to the same answer of like, hey, if you're metabolically healthy, there's probably not much reason to even worry about it too much. And if you're not over consuming calories, then it really doesn't matter what the specifics are of the food that you're eating.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. In the absence of a calorie surplus, we've got dozens of studies showing substituting fructose for sucrose, and we don't see any difference. We've had studies showing up to 200 grams of fructose a day, which you would never get in a regular diet, because there's no pure fructose food, no pure fructose sugar, really. Even a Coca-Cola is be a 55-45 split, or fruits it'd be a pretty close to a 50-50 split of fructose and glucose. So if you're going to eat 200 grams of pure fructose a day, which is what the studies did. They substituted up to 200 grams of fructose a day. And they did not see, that's 800 calories from pure fructose. They did not see, in the absence of a calorie surplus, not only did they not see that it was addictive, they didn't see any increased hedonic behavior. It wasn't inflammatory. There's multiple studies showing that it didn't show any signs of inflammation, whether it was C-reactive protein or homocysteine or all of those inflammation markers. They also showed that it didn't increase liver fat or obesity. So you just, in the absence of the calorie surplus, it doesn't seem to be an independent effect of fructose on any of those health markers.
There was a there was a study done years ago. I can't not remember what study it was, but I believe it was a pretty big study, and it was on fruit. And I think you and I have talked about this in the past, but they just kept feeding people more and more fruit. And I think they kept thinking that people were going to gain weight, but they weren't gaining any weight. And I think the result of the study was just that people pooped way more than they've seen in like previous studies or something like that. Do you recall any of that?
Yeah, I kind of briefly mentioned earlier that at any level, even eating as much fruit as you want, we consistently see improved health outcomes in the absence of a calorie surplus. And so, and we're seeing it more and more with the polyphenols, as mentioned, even with the orange juice. In the absence of fiber, but there's lots of fruits that I recommend in the diet and always have. Orange is obviously high in the satiety index, also high in potassium. But the berries, the low sugar fruits, the raspberries, the blueberries, and strawberries, I think raspberries have 5 grams of fiber per serving, and a pound of strawberries is only 130 calories. So these are fantastic swaps for people to use.
Watermelon,
in place of,
a lot of volume.
Yep, a lot of volume, with a lot of water. It's just a way for you to eat a lot fewer calories and still get some satiety, some sweetness in your diet. But yeah, there's no adverse effect to eating fruits. And again, as part of a healthy dietary pattern, you always want to make make that caveat. But fruit's something that I always saw in the guru diets that women in particular would avoid and would demonize, and it's totally unnecessary. And it could be very enjoyable and can provide, like I mentioned earlier, the energy that you need to perform better in your workouts.
I know you have a heavy pickleball schedule, so this will be the last thing I'll ask you. But on Jordan Syatt's podcast, you were talking about, you were telling people to sit down, and I thought that was really powerful. Can you share some of that with us? I thought that was epic. Well,
I was talking about a lot of people getting on and squawking about people using GLP-1 agonists, semaglutide, Wegovy, Ozempic, and then now the new tirzepatides, and people were complaining about saying it was cheating or a whole host of other things. And I just said that they're so incredibly effective, and we see, for the first time in ever, since the obesity epidemic has been rapidly increasing since the 70s, that we're starting to see kind of a tapering off and largely as a result of the fact that people do now have access to these GLP-1 agonists that curb appetite and get rid of food noise and allow people just to maintain a calorie deficit and lose weight, and that the health benefits from that are astounding in terms of diabetes reversal, blood pressure reduction, lipid reduction, cancer risk reduction. And people are complaining about that. And I said, there's so many other things that people do from, any medications, whether it's birth control or whether it's from hypogonadism needing TRT, or from low thyroid, hypothyroidism needing thyroid, just a host of different medications that people take. And then to be complaining or drinking alcohol or any other things that people do that are obviously bad for your health, and then passing judgment. And I just said that for each individual to be to kind of look inward first, and if you're someone who is benefiting from any medication and any medical intervention, that you should probably just sit down and let these folks decide on the cost-benefit ratio with their doctor as to what the benefits are. And that it kind of, I mentioned cancer, and that was one of the things that just popped into my head that came up in as somebody in your in one of your feeds on one of your comments, the dumpster fire that I call your comment section. And we don't see any evidence of that either with sugar consumption in the absence of a calorie surplus. There's been a lot of claims. Mark Hyman's one of the people who's just always out claiming that cancer causes, or that sugar causes cancer, and 70% of cancers are caused by sugar. I think he said that on Huberman's podcast recently. And there's no evidence to support that. Heritability of cancer, meaning your genetic predisposition, is probably accounts for over a third of cancers, and so if 2/3 is lifestyle, and the vast majority of those are caused by smoking and alcohol and drugs and overexposure to sun, and pollution, obesity, lack of exercise, stress, that leaves very little room for cancers or sugar's potential effects. But we do have human research. We don't have a single study showing that sugar causes cancer in the absence of a calorie surplus and obesity, which can happen with any food. But we do have some studies on consumption of sugar, sugary foods, and sugary beverages in relation to cancer risk, and that there was no evidence showing that it contributed to cancer. And
I think what people are referring to is maybe like the Warburg effect, which I'm sure you're well aware of. Is that?
Yeah, that's been proven. It's been proven.
It seems like cancer wants to run off of like glucose or something along those lines. Is that right?
Yeah, well, and cancer can run off of anything.
True.
Cancers are there's a very diverse, it's a very complicated disease. There's some clinical evidence showing that a keto diet can worsen cancer. I think the person to read up on that is, or to look at that, is Dr. Joey Zundel. He's a cancer biologist, and he does a good job of breaking down the fact that sugar doesn't feed cancer. And that oftentimes it's important for, probably a third of all cancer deaths as a result of cachexia, which is a loss of muscle tissue, just a wasting disease, and that calories become important at that point, just to stave off, the wasting effects of cancer and cancer treatment. But I think people have, there's been a lot of talk lately about how cancer rates how cancer's increased, and in fact, cancer survivorship has grown. But the actual cancer rates per capita have dropped over 30% in the last 20 years, and that's while sugar consumption has gone down as well over the last 20 or 30 years. So while obesity has gone up and diabetes has gone up, so hard to correlate those two by that standard. But I think that people have looked at I've seen some posts by Callie Means and others on the internet showing that, or trying to show that an increase in cancer survivorship means that cancer has increased, and it hasn't. Cancer rates have gone down significantly over the last, certainly since the 70s, but over the last 20 years have gone down significantly. You have to differentiate between, plus we're an older population, which cancer tends to mostly be prevalent in as you age. And we're a growing population, so you have to look at it per person, cancer rates by per capita, and those have declined significantly, and as has sugar consumption. So I'm just not inclined to think there's anything alarming about what you're doing. I think a lot of what I see on your comment section is unsupported by the evidence. I think a lot of people
get in there and fight for me, Stan. Get in there and get mad at me.
Boy, if I had enough hours in a day, it could be frustrating. Because people are pretty steeped in their beliefs, and generally speaking, they're just repeating something that they heard from their famous influencer or their favorite influencer on the internet. And they probably understand very little about the actual hierarchy of evidence and how an appeal to authority is on the lowest tier of that hierarchy of evidence. And that, the body of evidence, looking at the actual research, and in particular the human trials, and we have many. A lot of people refer to sugar's effect in terms of addiction behavior or what have you on animals, on mice or rats. We don't see the same effect on humans in terms of cancer, in terms of addiction, in terms of NAFLD and obesity. So we do have human trials, and I think that folks probably don't have the necessary training to interpret the literature, and generally are just repeating what somebody else said. But even if you look at what somebody else said and the evidence that they post, they're generally just reading the abstract and not looking, and probably not human trials, and they're not looking at the actual methods. So that's my preach on that. If you're making a comment and don't have evidence to support it, and if it isn't human evidence, then you should sit the fuck down. How about that? Go back to Jordan Syatt's podcast and GLP-1 agonists. Just sit the fuck down. Maybe this is a conversation for people who actually know what they're talking about.